Hi everybody. Now we look at the for company taxation session 2. We discussed previously session 1 transitional provision. Now we look at the session 2. So chargeability and computation of income tax. Hereafter we are going to purely discuss the current Internal Revenue Act provisions. As you know, this is open book examination. So after my discussion, you have to go to the real Internal Revenue Act and look at the provision and read the provision and underline the relevant important things. Okay. So I am going to cover this topic. First, imposition of income tax. That is very important in a tax law. Discussing the imposition part. Income tax payable, section 2, subsection 2. Income tax payable on taxable income, that one element of income tax payable. So what do you mean by taxable income? What do you mean by assessable income? Meaning, income tax payable on final withholding payment and final withholding payment definition, section 88. So there here, basically you will get a outline of what is the charging section. It's very important to study the chargeability provision. Based on chargeability provision, what are the income tax liability of a company? Basically, there are two income tax liabilities coming up. One is the liability coming from the taxable income and liability coming from the final withholding payment. So once you discuss this particular topic, you will understand the basically overview of the rule of taxation of a company. Look at first section 2, subsection 1, imposition of income tax. As you know, the section 2 is a very crucial section under the new act, and most of the acts, the section 2 again the chargeable provision. Now if you look at the section 2 of the Value Added Tax Act, imposition of Value Added Tax Act, section 2 of the NBT Act, imposition of the NBT Act, section 2 of the Economic Service Charge Act, imposition of ESC. So the imposition section is very important to understand, because whether transaction is liable to pay income tax or not, you can see from the point of charging section. If a transaction is captured under charging section, liable to pay income tax. If a transaction is not captured under the charging section, we could say it is outside the scope of tax, it is not liable. So therefore it is very important to understand, remember charging section O, the section to impose the tax. In our act, the section 2 subsection 1 provides the rule for imposition of income tax. So what does it say? Income tax is payable for each year of assessment. They mean you got to calculate the liability for a year of assessment basis. So the charging section identifies who is liable to pay income tax. Person is liable to pay income tax. On what? There are two components of income tax liability coming up. One is any person who has a taxable income or a person who receives the final withholding payment. The taxable income is the income earned. If I earned the income, if form part of your taxable income, you are liable to pay income tax on the taxable income. but second component is somewhat different, you see. If you receive a final withholding payment, you are liable to pay income tax on the final withholding payment. What is final withholding payment? We will discuss later. But slightly I can indicate here, this is the liability of withholdee. We have certain payment, if it is a final withholding payment. If withholding agent has not deducted the taxes, then even withholdee is liable to pay that amount of withholding tax. So, that has been brought up into the charging section, withholdee's tax liability as a final withholding payment. So, we will discuss these two components in detail. Therefore, it is very clear now, according to the charging section, the tax is payable for every year of assessment by a person. There are two components of income tax liability. What are they? The person who has a taxable income, the person who receives a final withholding payment. The section 2, subsection 2 tells, according to the charging section now, the total income tax payable shall comprise of tax on taxable income and tax on final withholding payment, right. So, the section 3 deals with calculation of taxable income. Section 88 provides what are those payments of final withholding payments. In both cases, to calculate the tax, you have to apply the tax rates which are given in the first schedule. So, I think I should tell you, latter part of the act there are certain schedules, no. The first schedule provides the tax rates. If you go to first schedule, tax rates are provided for each type of tax person. Item 1 of the first schedule, tax rates on the individuals. Item 2, tax rates of partnerships. Item 3, tax rates of trusts. Item 4, tax rates of companies. So, our syllabus is mainly on company taxation, therefore, you have to go through the item 4. So, you have to see what are the proper tax rates to be applied as per first schedule on the taxable income as well as final withholding payments. We come to the calculation. So, it is very important to understand the meaning of these terms. The person defined as exhaustive definition covering individuals and entity, but includes body of person, corporate or unincorporate, an executor, non-governmental organization and charitable institution. You would have discussed under the previous stages taxation of NGOs, charitable institution and all. So, your strategic level is mainly you are focusing on corporate taxation. So, the company is covered under the definition of entity. The company is liable to pay income tax as a person because the company is an entity. The person includes an entity. You are liable to pay for each year of assessment. The section 20 defines the year of assessment. The general interpretations are given under section 195 in alphabetic order. But there are certain section provides definition for a specific terms. So, the term year of assessment is defined under section 20. According to section 20, the year of assessment means the period of 12 months starting from 1st April and ending on 31st March. No? Similar to the previous act definition, no difference. They are said that is the reason you have to prepare the account for 31st March, it is a compulsory. But as you know, certain entities may have to prepare the accounts other than 31st March, no, for good reason. For example, like a government department, their accounting year is calendar year, 31st December. There may be certain private company also, which are subsidiary company in Sri Lanka, where the holding company abroad. You have to prepare the Sri Lankan subsidiary company's financial statement in line with the holding company's financial statement to facilitate the consolidation. So, what I am trying to say, there are good reasons for a company to prepare the account other than 31st March, but you can't just prepare other than 31st March. If so, you have to get a approval from the Commission General to prepare the account other than 31st March. But the new act, if you get an approval to change the accounting period, that is amount to the change of year of assessment. That is a confusion, I should tell you. The same concept we had in the previous act also, but the previous act, even if you change the accounting period, the year of assessment is always 1st April to 31st March. But the new act, the moment if you change the accounting period other than 31st March, it amounts to the change of year of assessment. Okay. Look at the application check 14, the continuation from the previous session. Let us say a company, the accounting period is 31st March, they are trying to change the accounting period to 31st December from the year 2020. The reason for the change is justifiable because they have to prepare the accounts in line with the parents company's request in abroad. Let us say their parent company's accounting period would have been 31st December. Maybe to go in line with the consolidation requirement, the Sri Lanka subsidiary company also have to prepare the accounts for the year ending 31st December. So, in that case what do we do? Yeah, the company must immediately write to the Commission General under section 20 subsection 2, giving the reason, requesting for the approval to change the accounting period. But remember, if the approval is granted, then according to the section 20, that amounts to the change of year of assessment as well. As you know, section 203 is a transitional provision. The subsection 3 tells you if anybody change the accounting period under the previous act, do you have to get another approval under the current act as well? No. Then that approval shall be deemed to be continued or granted under the current act as well. So, that approval shall continue to apply under deeming provision even after 1st April 2018. Therefore, you are not supposed to write again to change the accounting period. But as you know, under the current act, the moment if you change the accounting period, that amounts to a change of year of assessment. No? Therefore, the deeming provision also provides once you deemed, you have been deemed that you have changed the accounting period, it amounts to a change of year of assessment as well. Look at the application check 15. The company changed its accounting period 31st March to 31st December in line with the approval granted by the Commission General under section 28 of the Inland Revenue Act number 10 of 2006 in 2016-17. So, what I am trying to say is here, as per section 2020 or 203, the company shall be deemed to have granted the approval under the new act as well to change the year of assessment. Okay. So, now you see according to the charging section, there are two parts of the income tax liability. I could say two components of income tax liability. One is tax payable on taxable income, secondly tax payable on final withholding payment. So, now we are going to focus in detail first component, income tax payable on taxable income. The subsection 3 tells you how to calculate the income tax payable on taxable income. Again in a formula type wise, take your taxable income and apply the tax rate given in the first schedule. For a company, you have to look at the item for the first schedule, apply the tax rate to the taxable income. They can claim the tax credit. There are mainly two credits given. One is a foreign tax credit given under section 80. The other one is any other tax credit under the act. Then you get a tax payable. So, what is foreign tax credit? Let us say if a Sri Lankan company paid a income tax in other country on the offshore business, if same business point is taxable in Sri Lanka, in order to avoid the double taxation, such tax paid in abroad can be claimed as a tax credit in Sri Lanka. They call foreign tax credit. Then there won't be a double taxation. No? You are getting a tax credit system. This concept was there in the previous act also. Even you can see this one in the double tax agreements as well. We discuss in detail non-resident taxation. But there is a specialty in the current act where section 80 facilitates the claim of tax credit even with the country where we do not have a double tax agreement. Because if you look at the previous act, you can claim the foreign tax credit only on those tax payment on those countries if you have a double tax agreement only. But here you do not worry about whether you have a double tax agreement or not in those countries, it does not matter. Any tax paid in foreign country, if the same point is taxable in Sri Lanka, you calculate the tax liability under the Sri Lankan law, but you claim the foreign tax credit under section 80. Then other tax credit claimable under section 89. So, withholding taxes on the source income you can claim, but the law is silent about the economic service charge claim. It is understood that out of your taxable payable amount you can claim the economic service charge as well as under the ESC law. Shall I work out a simple example for this? Application check 16. Take example, the company had a following information for the year of assessment 1920. Taxable income 13 million, liable at 28% tax rate. Withholding tax credit of 280,000 on the source income, on the interest income. The interest income already included in your taxable income of 30 million rupees. The ESC payment of 101.9 million rupees. How to calculate the tax payable? Take 30 million rupees, apply 28% given in the first schedule, item 4, 8,400,000. Tax credit withholding tax credit under the current act, you claim under section 89, 280,000. So, income tax payable 8,120,000. From that you can claim ESC, the whole amount can be claimable, no carry forward ESC. So, the balance payable will be 6,220,000 rupees. Now, the current act is very clear, even to claim the tax credit, the section clearly specified. Everything is very straightforward, you see. Okay. Now, look at the income tax payable on taxable income in detail. So, I have got to work out the taxable income. The section 3 provides what are the components to be added in my taxable income. There are 4 sources are applicable. This income source we call assessable income. So, the assessable incomes are very broader than the statutory income recognized under the previous act. And also you should know, we have only 4 sources. Look at the previous act, there are about 13 to 14 sources, you see. How it is confined to 3-4 sources? Because lot of sources like dividend, interest incomes are covered under investment income, that is the reason. Actually speaking, the scope has been widened, even capital gain also brought up under investment income. So, therefore, you have to work out the assessable income from 4 sources. What are they? Employment, business, investment and other sources. Aggregate and claim qualifying payment and relief under section 52. You should know 52 is operating section to claim qualifying payment relief. So, those qualifying payment reliefs are given under 5th schedule, schedule number 5. The first part of the 5th schedule is a qualifying payment, second part of the schedule is a relief. When you come to company taxation, the relief is not applicable, the relief is applicable only for individual taxation, according to section 52. You can ignore the relief in this situation, since we are talking only the company taxation. Basically, the taxable income calculation is very simple now, you see. When you come to company, we do not have employment income also. So, basically we have 3 types of assessable income. What are they? The business, investment and other income, if any, claim the qualifying payment. That is your taxable income. It is a very simple process to calculate. You got to calculate the taxable income for each person. No aggregation is possible, even for child's income, I believe. But each source assessable income should be separately calculated. That means, the business income, assessable income from business you can't couple with the assessable income from investment. Assessable income from employment cannot be coupled with the assessable income from business. Assessable income from 2 different business can be worked out together, but the assessable income from business cannot be coupled with any other assessable income. That is the point, because the assessable income should be separately calculated. So, income tax payable on taxable income. Again, as you know, the assessable income comprises of each source. So, what is the scope of assessable income? That is also given in section 4. For resident person, those income sources wherever the source arises, that means the resident persons are taxable on universal income. with the income arising in Sri Lanka or outside Sri Lanka, those income falls within the scope of chargeability of income tax if you are a resident person, like in the previous act. But in case of non-resident person, he is liable to pay income tax on those 4 sources to the extent that income arising in or derived from a source in Sri Lanka. That means, in relation to non-resident person, there must be income source in Sri Lanka for taxation. We discuss in non-resident taxation later on. The section 73 deals with the source in Sri Lanka for non-resident taxation. But that question is not applicable for a resident person. Why? To the resident person, wherever the source arises, is liable to pay income tax. This is the basically scope of tax, no? You may be knowing this. The resident person liable for income tax on the income source, wherever the source arises. The non-resident person liable to pay income tax on those sources which are arising in or derived from a source in Sri Lanka. Okay. Look at the example, application check 17. Let us say a resident company in Sri Lanka has provided consultant services outside Sri Lanka for a fee of $10,000. Are they liable to pay income tax? Or this income, does it fall within the scope? Company being a resident person in Sri Lanka is chargeable with income tax on the income source wherever the source arises. Therefore, even though this income was earned from service rendered outside Sri Lanka, such income falls within the scope of chargeability. But sometimes there may be exemption provided for this. The chargeability is different from the exemption, remember. The exemption could be claimed only if it falls within the scope of chargeability. If it is outside the chargeability, there is no necessity to give the exemptions. So, what we are discussing here, section 4 is the chargeability, okay? Whether the incomes fall within the scope of chargeability, that is the point. Yes, being a resident person, wherever the income earned, chargeable with income tax. Look at the next question, application check 18. A company non-resident in Sri Lanka has carried out a business in Sri Lanka and earned $250,000. Though it is a non-resident company, but the income was earned or derived from a source in Sri Lanka. What is source in Sri Lanka? As their business carried out in Sri Lanka, that is a source in Sri Lanka as per section 73. Therefore, such income source fall within the scope of chargeability for that particular non-resident company. Look at next question, application check 19. A non-resident individual earned a fee of $1,500 in providing a professional service abroad. Of course, this income outside the scope of chargeability. Why? If you are a non-resident person, only income arising or derived from a source in Sri Lanka is chargeable. But this is the source not in Sri Lanka, it is a foreign source. Therefore, there is no taxation because it falls outside the scope of tax, not because of the exemption. If you look at the exemptions, nowhere you get these exemptions on the new act, but why is not taxable? Because it is outside the scope of tax. Okay. Having aggregated the 4 sources, you must claim the qualifying payment reliefs given under section 52. So, for an entity the relief is not applicable, the total qualifying payments are referred to in 5th schedule, can be deducted in arriving at taxable income. To give a summary of the 5th schedule, we have only 3 qualifying payment applicable to an entity. Donation money to an approved charitable institution caring for sick or needy people. The conditions are, there must be a donation in money to the approved charitable institution, but the institution should have been established for caring sick or needy people. Once you satisfy those 3 conditions only, you can claim that amount as a qualifying payment under first category. The second one is a very broad. Donation can be in money or otherwise. Even the value of the goods also donated can be a donation. But the previous act was clear in relation to the amount of donation. No? If your donation is given in goods, what is the amount of amount you consider as a donation? Is it the cost of the good donation or market value of the goods donation? The previous act was very clear on this. Yeah, the market value of the donation at the time of donation become a value of the donation. But current act is not given that sort of a indication here. I think there is an amendment required in relation to the amount of donation, or otherwise not in money, otherwise. But this donation is given to the government and government funds, etc. You can go through the 5th schedule, you will understand what sort of entities or what sort of donations are covered under this basically. No? Then profit remitted to the President Fund by the public corporation. The public corporation out of their after tax profit under the statute enacted by the public corporation, they are supposed to remit the profit to the President Fund. So, that money remitted could be taken as a qualifying payment relief deductible against the asset income in arriving at taxable income. Look at the question now, application check 20. But you see here, this qualifying payment limits are given, donation money to approved charity, the limits are very clear. When come to companies, look at the 5th schedule is very clear. You can maximum claim 1/5 of asset income of 500th, whichever is less, but no carry forward. When you come to qualifying payment in relation to the donation in money or otherwise to the government, no limit is given. That means you can set off up to the amount of taxable income, but there is no provision to carry forward. That is the point. Again, the public corporations profit remittances to the President Fund, you can set off up to the taxable income, but no carry forward. All 3, no carry forward provision in short. The first one, we have a upper limit of claim, maximum 1/3 of taxable income of 500,000 for a companies. Second and third, there is no upper limit, you can claim up to the amount of taxable income. So, very simple now, we have only 3 qualifying payment, not like a previous act. No. Look at the example or application check 20. A company made a donation to the government in the year of 1920, 7,500,000. That means you can set off up to taxable income, but the problem here is the company has no taxable income, because maybe it has a loss. So, no set off possible. Can they carry forward? Yeah, no carry forward provisions. So, therefore, the answer is the 5th schedule does not facilitate the carry forward of qualifying payment. Therefore, company is not in a position to carry forward the qualifying payment, even donation made to the government to the year of assessment 2021. But that is simply, I think, not in line with the transitional provision, I believe. As you know, we discussed the previous session, any unclaimed, unabsorbed qualifying payment as of 31st March 2018, the transition provision facilitates to claim those qualifying payment after 1st April 2018. No? But any fresh qualifying payment made after 1st April 2018 for government donation, there is no carry forward provision. So, something not contradictory, something not in line with the transitional provision, it is a contradictory. So, I believe there should be amendment required. Now, we will come to the second component of income tax liability, income tax payable on final withholding payment. As you told, it is a withholding tax liability. Calculation is simple. Take your final withholding payment, apply the tax rates given in the first schedule. Not all the withholding payments are final withholding payment, you have to be careful. There are 4 withholding payments or 4 payments which are subject to withholding tax are recognized as a final withholding payment. The idea is, if withholding agent not deducted the taxes, withholdee should pay such income tax as a final withholding payment according to the charges section. What are the payments are identified as final withholding payments? First one, dividend paid by a resident company. A dividend distributed by a resident company to the shareholder. The shareholder could be either resident or non-resident, does not matter, but the dividend is paid by a resident company, considered as a final withholding payment, not for foreign dividend received. Dividend distributed by the resident company. When we come to interest paid to the resident individuals and charitable institution only. So, the interest payment to a company is not a final withholding payment. Third, amount paid as a winning from lottery, reward, betting or gambling. Finally, any payment made to non-resident person that are subject to withholding tax. So, that D component we will discuss in detail under non-resident taxation. After leaving out the item D, for a companies only 2 things are relevant. The dividend paid by resident companies, any payment of winning from a lottery, reward, betting or gambling. Only 2 items only, you see. The interests are final withholding payment only for individuals and charitable institution. So, we are going to discuss that one now. Okay. You see, there are, if you look at the law, there are other payments also subject to withholding tax, like royalties, natural resource payments, service fee. Are those payments also recognized as final withholding payments? No. Okay. Then take your final withholding pay. What are those tax rates? Here, not the progressive rate, withholding tax rate. That's the idea. Withholding and not deducted withholding tax. Withholding should pay the amount equal to withholding tax. So, withholding tax is given under item 10 of the first schedule. You can go through leisurely. We will discuss one by one detail. So, as far as final withholding payments are concerned, these are the rates. In the case of dividend, not specified separately, so 14%. In case of interest or discount, 5% given clearly. Benefit for lottery reward or betting or gambling, not specified, therefore 14%. Any unspecified sort withholding tax is 14% under the first schedule. Any payment to non-residents depending on the double tax agreement or depending on the nature of the payment. Okay. Then section 88 subsection 2 tells you, though final withholding payment, tax on final withholding payment is recognized as a income tax liability of withholdee as per charges section, under certain circumstances this liability could be relieved. Those instances are captured under section 88 subsection 2. What are those instances? A. Tax withheld from a final withholding payment by the withholding agent. That means, withholding agent has properly deducted the withholding tax and remitted to department or no before 15th of the following month. We are paid, that means what? So, withholdee has received the tax amount net of withholding tax. Then, since the withholdee has already contributed withholding tax, the liability could be relieved. Then, under 86 subsection 3 tells you, where the withholding agent not deducted the taxes at the time of payment, but that does not mean it is escape from the liability. No, the withholding agent should have paid the taxes the same amount at the same time out of his pocket. But subsequently there are section to reclaim or recover that amount from the withholdee from the subsequent payment. But the liability is there, you have to pay out of your pocket. So, even if you are paid like that, withholdee's point of view, the liability could be relieved. Third one, where withholding agent has failed to withhold the tax and he has not paid even. Then withholdee also remember jointly and severally liable for the amount of withholding tax. You should have paid out of his pocket within 15 days after end of the month in which the amount is received, as per section 86 subsection 4. But the point here is, but they are given the same deadline, no? Withholding agent has, without deducting the tax under 86 subsection 3, if you pay the tax, if withholding, if you not aware about that fact, there may be possibility withholdee also paying the same amount of tax. So, therefore, I think that there must be amendment required if the same structure continues. There will be a further deadline should be given to the withholdee for remittance of the withholding tax. I will put this scenario into the example for you to explain simply. Look at the application check 21. I give a simple example for you to have a clear understanding. Let us say the company A paid a dividend of 10 million to company B. So, the company A is recognized as a withholding agent, company B is a recipient of the income, that is withholdee. So, dividend is subjected to withholding tax at 14% as per section 84 of the Act. Section 84 authorized to withhold the tax of the payment of dividend. For tax rates, you have to go through item 10 of the first schedule, withholding tax rates. Take for scenario, Let us say the A Limited has deducted the withholding tax at 14%, that means they have deducted 1,400,000 and paid. In that situation, the B will receive only the net dividend of 8,600,000. Then the liability under the charge section, that is a tax on final withholding payment liability, could be relieved in the hands of B Limited. Look at second scenario. A Limited has not deducted the withholding tax. Let us say the A Limited has paid the entire 10 million rupees, but the A Limited has paid that 1,400,000 to the Department of Field Revenue on or before 15th the following month out of its pocket. As I told you, later on A Limited can recover that amount from the withholdee from B Limited, but A Limited is supposed to pay that amount under section 86 subsection 3. Even in that case, since the A Limited has paid the withholding tax amount, B Limited's point of view, the liability could be relieved. Take the last scenario. The A Limited has not deducted withholding tax and not paid that withholding tax at 15% to the department also. But since the B Limited has jointly and severally liable for the amount of withholding tax, B Limited has paid out of its pocket. Should have paid because they got entire 10 million rupees. The B Limited have found that they have got amount without deducting the withholding tax, they have to pay on or before 15th of the subsequent month. Then the liability could be relieved, but this liability could be relieved to B Limited due to the payment by B Limited to the department. Okay. Look at final question, application check 22, to understand this overall picture of the liability. Look at the tax implication on the following income for the year of assessment 1920 for a company. Let us say the company receives the interest on deposit from a bank which is subject to withholding tax at 5%. Under what component this is liable? Charges section. When interest is received by a company, is it a final withholding payment? No. The interest is a final withholding payment only for individuals and charitable institutions. They have a company and this become a part of your investment income, that become a part of, in other words, taxable income. The interest being an investment income is a part of taxable income. So, the liable to pay income tax at the normal rate as per first schedule. Whatever withholding tax deducted could be claimed as a tax credit. We discuss under section 2 subsection 3, calculation of tax on taxable income. The second scenario, let us say a company which receives the dividend from another company which is subject to withholding tax at 14%. The dividend is a final withholding payment for every shareholders, whether company or not. So, coming under second component, but the liability is not payable, liability could be relieved because the company which paid the dividend has probably deducted and paid to the department the amount of withholding tax. So, liability could be relieved as per section 88 subsection 2. Finally, the company which receives the royalty income which is subject to withholding tax at 14%. The royalty income, is it a final withholding payment? No, not recognized. The royalty is not recognized as a final withholding payment for resident person. Therefore, royalty is a part of investment income if you go in detail. So, that become part of your taxable income and apply the tax rate as per first schedule. What a withholding tax deducted could be claimed as a tax credit. So, you can work out your tax on taxable income as per section 2 subsection 3. think that's with that. I think today we discuss basically the charging section, and coming from the charging section, there are two components of income tax liability. One is tax payable on taxable income, tax payable on final withholding payments. Tax payable on taxable incomes are specified under section 2, subsection 3. Take your taxable income and apply the tax rates. For the tax rate, you have to go through the first schedule, item 1 to 9. For company, item 4. Taxable income should be worked out as per section 3. You aggregate your income sources, claim the qualifying payment for a companies. The income sources are called assessable income from 4 sources. The scope of assessable income chargeability depending on the residential status. Then the second component of the income tax liability is tax on final withholding payment. That is a tax liability coming to the withholdee. Take a final withholding payment as defined under section 88. Only few payments which are subject to withholding tax are recognized as a final withholding payment. Then apply the tax rates. For tax rate, we have to apply the withholding tax rates given in item 10 of the first schedule. Okay. Please understand the structure of this particular tax liability calculation or charging section for us to move forward. Thank you very much.